people, I'm DJ Graish, and in tonight's live stream I'm going to show you how to use Ableton Live at a very basic beginner level. So I'm going to show you the interface, I'm going to show you how to make your first beat, and what all these different views and all these different controls do. But first, let me know if you can see me, let me know if you can hear me, and let me know if you can hear the music. Shout out Garfield. Amazing. Amazing. Thank you guys. So I had one live stream where the screen just completely froze, and then that was 2 weeks ago, and then the one last week you just couldn't hear the music at all. So there was 2 fails in a row, but I'm back. I've done some troubleshooting today, and hopefully this one will go smoothly. And you may have noticed that the intro music is just playing as a single track now. One thing I realized is that loading up this massive orchestral drum and bass tune as my intro music was basically pushing my computer to the limits, because it's got all these different layers of violins, cellos, you know, French horn and all this stuff, and just pushing it way too far. Shout out Jamshid, shout out Sanford and Daughter, MFC Barcelona, and Garfield. Big up guys, thank you for joining me. And if any of you guys are trying to learn Ableton Live, tonight I'm going to show you how to really get started with it at a basic level so you can follow along. And I just quickly exported SideQuest before the stream so I could use it as my intro music. And I was saying last week that basically the laptop only has 8 gigs of RAM, but obviously it's Apple Silicon, so that's unified memory. So it does usually work pretty good for music production, even for streaming, but I shouldn't push it so far by loading up the full-on orchestra, you know what I mean? So when it gets to the end of this tune, I'll get started in explaining. In the meantime, how's everyone doing? Garfield says he loves his MacBook Air M4. And the amazing thing about the MacBook Air is that it doesn't have a fan, so it's never going to annoy you when you're making your music. It's never going to interrupt you with fan noise. And it's plenty powerful enough to run Ableton Live, so it's not going to struggle. Shout out DJ Fully Loaded, thank you to my brother Mark for helping me with the sound check today. I did a little practice stream just to make sure it's actually going to work. And Mark had it on his projector, and the first time it didn't work and the second time it did, so I'm just not going to touch OBS now. Jamshid's on the M2 Pro and a Push 2. There'll be more push content coming soon. I do still have the Push 3, which I need to give back to Ableton, but I'll get one more tutorial done with it first before I give it back. All right, so here we are in Ableton Live, and I'm going to explain a little bit about the interface first of all. So let me just load up a new set. So in Ableton, they call just a blank project a live set. In fact, anytime you're opening an Ableton Live project, it's a set. They call it a set, right? So this comes from the fact that this software was originally designed for playing live, and you literally put your sets together that you can go and play in the club and on stage, etc. So there's two main views to Ableton Live. You may have seen this one before with the squares and wondered what the hell this is all about, and I will be showing you all about this today. So this one's called the session view, and the reason why is because this is the view that you use for performing live on stage, and you basically do a session. And all of these little squares basically are going to contain your loops. So you've got drum loops, bass loops, instrument loops, and all sorts of different loops. Whereas the other view is for putting together tracks from start to finish. So if you're actually going to try and produce a tune, you would eventually put it into here and make your arrangement. So this is the arrangement view. So they're the two main views of this top section. And then you've got this bottom section here, which also has two views. One of them is called the clip view, and this is where you're going to see all the details of all your clips, and I'll show you that in a bit. And then you've got this other one which is called the device view, and this is where you put devices. So devices can include instruments, MIDI effects, audio effects, and VSTs, which are plugins. So I'm going to show you all of this, but we're just doing the tour first of all. Then the next part of the tour is the browser. So here in the top left, if you click this button, you'll open up the browser, and this is what it looks like. So you've got the top section called library, which includes things like instruments and effects, and they're all in these lists. And then you've got a section below it called places, and this is where you can add your folders full of samples. So if you've got a lot of different samples or you plan on downloading them, what I would recommend doing is creating one folder that you just put everything into, and in my case it's called production, and always has been since I ever first started making music back in the day. I made a production folder on my hard drive, and it's just been that since, you know. You just keep putting all your new sample packs in there. And then I wanted to show you this top section here. So running along the top, you've got a section called the control bar. And this contains the play, pause, stop and record buttons. And then you've also got this one here for the BPM. So let's just click that. So where it says 120, you can choose your BPM. So if you're going to make a hip hop tune, for example, you might want to change this to something like 80 or 90, and in this case I'm going to choose 92 BPM. Then you've got this button here, which is this sort of blank dot and black dot, and when you turn that on and press play, it sounds like this. So that beeping that you hear is called the metronome, and this is a way that you can keep in time with the project. So you see these lines here on the project, they're called the grid. And if we zoom in, you're going to see that the metronome represents these lines. So what you can do is you can play the drums along with this, and that means that your drums are going to be in time with the project, and that really helps when you start adding effects to them that are based on synchronizing it to that metronome. All right. There is a button up here that's the loop button, which is pretty important. So if we turn that on and then just put this marker around 4 bars, now watch what happens to the playhead. So the playhead is this line that's moving along. And watch what happens when it gets to the number 5, which is the end of bar 4. It just loops back to the beginning, right? So you can do looping in the arrangement view as well. But when it comes to doing loops, this is what the session view is designed for. It's basically a loop player. So the way how it works is this. You've got 4 tracks by default, and there's 2 different types of tracks. One of them is audio tracks and one of them is MIDI tracks. So what's the difference? Well, audio tracks are where you put audio clips, which are basically just samples, you know, bits of recorded audio. So they could be loops. And you can also record your own audio in there. And I'm going to show you what that looks like now. So if I go into the browser and just have a look in these samples, so all of this is audio, right? And then you can just grab any random bit of audio, like let me go into drum loops and just drag that in. So this is what it looks like when you put a clip into a clip slot. And when you double click it, look at the bottom now. This is the clip view, and this is what it looks like when you have an audio clip. You can see the waveform there, and I think I'm going to need to turn this down a bit. And let me press play. You can hear that it's playing along with the metronome perfectly, and this is what the waveform looks like. Now let's create a MIDI clip and I'll show you what that looks like. So if you just double click onto one of these empty clip slots on a MIDI track, it creates a MIDI clip. And this is what it looks like. You've got the piano up one side, and then you've got this grid where you can put these notes on. So let me show you that. If you just double click, then it will create this block, and that's known as a note. And you can put your notes in by clicking on there like that, or you can record them in using a MIDI keyboard, which is the more fun way of doing it, to be honest. So I'm going to delete all this. That was a drum and bass loop, but I'm actually going to be showing you how to make a hip hop tune. But before I do, let me just show you one more thing. So where you've got this number up here, which in my case is 44.1 kilohertz, it might be a different number for you. But when you click that, that takes you into your sound settings. Now here under audio, you've got input device and output device. Now you can choose either if you've got an audio interface, you can select it in here. If not, you can just choose the speakers of your laptop, or you can choose the headphones of your laptop. You know, so you've got options there, but I'm going to keep mine on this U46DJ since that's the audio interface that I'm using. All right. So let's talk about instruments. You're going to want some kind of a drum machine, ideally, unless you're just using a drum loop. There's a couple of different ones you can use. If you're using the Ableton Live Lite software, then you probably wouldn't have some of these, but one thing you do have is this. It's called Impulse. So let me drag that in, and this is what it looks like. Hang on a sec. This is what it looks like. So it's an instrument with some squares, and what you do is you go to your samples, and you can just grab, for example, a kick. Wait a sec. So I'm going to go to drum one shots, and then I've got kicks. So these are the types of samples that you would be working with to make some drums. You've got kicks, which is the big bass drum, and then you can just drag that onto one of the squares of Impulse. You've also got snare, so that's the one that sounds like this. And you can just drag that onto the next square, and then you would typically have hi-hats. So they sound like this, hang on, sound like this. What you're doing is basically you're building a drum kit out of the kicks, snares, hi-hats, cymbals and stuff. And then you can just double click here, make the MIDI clip, and then you can put in the notes for the different hits. So you could put a kick there, you could put a snare there, and let's play it. Now obviously that's way too loud. So that's how you do your drums in Impulse. Now if you've got a standard or suite version of Ableton Live, there is another drum machine that you can use. So I'm going to show you that one. It's called the Drum Rack, and if you drag that in, if you open it up like this, you can see a load of presets which come with drums in them. And there's loads of drum machines, like classic drum machines from the 80s and 90s that you can use. and I'm going to use this Boom Bap Drums, which is basically a drum rack that I've put together by dragging in all the kicks and snares and everything. Now, as well as the technique I just showed you where you can draw in the notes, you can also record. And the way you can do it is, see in the top right you've got this symbol that's a keyboard. Now that is your computer MIDI keyboard, which means you can play the computer keyboard like a musical keyboard. So all you have to do is this. Make sure that it's on the right octave, and then let me turn this track back up. Hello, Ben. Shout out E.E. Wilson. So I've got a drum rack here and I've put all these kicks and snares into it. And now I want to show you the way how you can make some loops in the session view without having to click and put the notes in. This is a more musical way of doing it where you actually play it like an instrument. So let me just explain about these squares and this circle here. So all of these squares are stop buttons, and when you click them it stops the clip. And when you activate this track using this arm button down here, they turn to circles, which are actually record buttons. So what you do is you click the circle like this and it's going to play the metronome, okay? Now when you hear that metronome, it's basically giving you a counting, and you can set it here where the metronome button is. There's a little drop down menu and you've got a counting, and I set it to 1 bar. That just means you're going to hear 4 beeps before it starts recording. So it's going to go dub 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 dub, and then it'll start recording. You can like play the instrument, okay? So let's go. Hang on a sec. Wait a sec. So I'm going to do that again with the metronome on. So let's go. And there's an interesting view down here. Let me show you this. Down here is that clip view again. But watch what happens when you record. See that? So it makes the MIDI clip as long as you want until you press stop. So I've recorded in some kicks and snares there and they sound like this. And you can hear that some of them aren't necessarily where they're supposed to be. So there's a few ways you can deal with that. You can either highlight them and just move them like this, or there's something called quantization. So quantization is basically a way of making them automatically snap onto the grid. And the way how you get into the menu for that is Shift, Command and U. Or if you're using Windows, it will be Shift, Control and U. Now this is the quantize menu here, and you've got different options like grid, a quarter note, an eighth note. You can also choose whether it's just going to affect the start point or the start and end of the note. Let's play it again. So now they're perfectly in time, maybe a bit too much in time. But I also have some hi-hats here. So let's record those. So up here, there's this cluster of buttons, and the furthest right one, which has a circle on, allows you to record again, but it'll record over it. It's not going to get rid of the kick and snare, it's just going to allow me to add some other stuff. So let's go for it. Alright, so they were way off time. So usually when you record your first clips, they're going to be off time, right? You just have to deal with it. So you can either decide to record again, or you can just quantize them. It's up to you. So that's how you can record MIDI, and that's how you can put in MIDI notes. So these notes here, these blocks on here, they're known as MIDI. And these are notes. So that's how you can put in your MIDI notes. You can either just double click like that to create one. You can drag the start and end points to make them longer or shorter. You can move them all around. And that's basically MIDI for the drum rack. Now, MIDI looks slightly different for other instruments, such as pianos and keyboards and stuff. So I'll show you that now. And I wanted to show you this instrument called a Rhodes. Now, you might never have heard of a Rhodes, but you've almost certainly heard it before, because it's this super chilled keyboard sound that's used in a lot of chilled out, like liquid drum and bass, chilled out hip hop beats, lounge music, all sorts of stuff. And Ableton Live has quite a few of them built in. So what I'm going to do is just go to Instruments and type in E-piano, which is another name for a Rhodes, right? So let's use E-piano basic. Now I'm going to need to turn up the octave. So on your keyboard you've got the Z and X keys, and they change the octave, which means like moving the keyboard further up. So listen to this. Sounding low, right? I'm going to press the X key. Sounds higher. X again. Sounds higher. You know? And then you press Z to go back down. Or if in America, that would be Z. So. And there's also something called velocity, which basically is how loud, how hard or soft you're pressing the notes. Now, obviously, if you're using a computer keyboard as a MIDI keyboard, it doesn't have that pressure sensitivity. So what you can do is you can use the C and V buttons to make it lower. So listen now. That's almost like I'm slamming on the keys. But if I press C a couple of times, it's like I'm playing them more chilled, you know? So I'm going to record a little bit of E-piano. All right, let me do that again. All right, let me go again. I'm going to do that one more time. And this is sometimes how it goes when you're recording, you know, you need a few takes. Almost. All right, let me play that back. So I'm pretty happy with that. Only this last note kind of cuts off a bit, but it's really easy to stretch that out and make it longer. So anyway, this is what a MIDI clip looks like. Not a drums MIDI clip, but a instrument MIDI clip. So it's got a piano down one side, and what you can do is you can put your mouse just to the left of the piano and then click and drag sideways, and it zooms in on just that area of the piano where you've put your notes, so you can really clearly see exactly what you've recorded. And as you can see, I've recorded some chords with a little bit of melody on top. So these three here is a chord. So you've got three notes. It goes like this. So that's a chord. And then we've got these notes up here, which is me playing a melody on top of the chords, right? So you've got chord 1 and chord 2 and a bit of melody on top of them. So that's what a MIDI clip looks like, as for a normal instrument like a keyboard. And again, this is what a MIDI clip looks like for drums. Very similar, but instead of having all of the notes, it's just got the drum hits that you've put in there. So let's keep it moving. So I've shown you a drum instrument. I've shown you an E-piano. Now I want to quickly just show you some effects. So one of the effects I want to show you is this. It's called the EQ8. And if you pop it out, it can go into full screen like this. So what you're seeing is basically a spectrum analyzer, which is showing you the audio spectrum from the bass on the left side all the way up to the super high treble on the right side and everything in between. So obviously this middle section here is like the mid-range sounds. And you can see that this E-piano is smack bang in the middle of the mid-range. It looks like this. Now you've got this blue line here with these yellow bits on, 1, 2, 3 and 4. This is the EQ, and what you can do is you can create shapes like this. You can, for example, the first one, you could put it onto this shape, which is called a high pass, and then you can use this little frequency control to move it up. And what that does is it gets rid of the super low end, which is the sub bass. And then on the other side, you could put the opposite shape, which is called a low pass, and then you can move the frequency of that one, and that will take out the top end and just leave the bottom end. But in this case, what we've basically done is created something called a band pass, which is going to just let a band of frequencies through, and it's that middle band there. And you can move this further down to really like sort of deaden the top end. You can also boost things, so you could grab this number 2 and just boost it up like that and emphasize certain frequencies. Another thing I wanted to do with this is, you may have heard of an effect, if you're a guitarist particularly, you may have heard an effect called tremolo, or if you're American, you might call it tremolo. Anyway, this is an effect which basically gives it this shimmering quality, and I'm going to show you that now. So this is a tool called the Auto Pan Tremolo, and I'm going to put it on tremolo mode, and then I'm going to set where it says rate, I'm just going to put it to synced and then choose, I think it's a 16th. Now listen to this. Can you hear that? If I put it on 100%, it's really obvious. And then you can put it to something more subtle, like 33%. Maybe a bit more, like 45. And it's just giving it that sort of shimmering sound, which is very typical of this style of E-piano. Next, I want to show you a reverb. So there's the normal reverb, and then there's also one called hybrid reverb. They both do very similar things. And if you want to know what reverb is, imagine you've just bought a new apartment and you've just moved in and there's literally nothing in there. No sofa, no bed, no bookcase, no TV, no nothing. Literally just an empty flat, right? And you walk into the living room and you clap your hands and you're going to hear and the clap's going to go on for several seconds. That's basically reverberation. So here we've got the reverb unit, which is designed to, it's like a digital version of an empty room. So we can put our E-piano into an empty echoey room. And by the way, if you've ever wondered why people love to sing in the shower, there's a couple of reasons. But I think one of the reasons is because the bathroom is tiled, and therefore it's got this echo because your sound is, your voice is sort of bouncing off the walls and coming back to you in a pleasing way. And it's a natural reverb, and this is why people love to sing in the shower. So there's other instruments that you can add. For example, if we type in bass, look at all of these different types of bass that you can get. There's hundreds to choose from, and they range from very synthetic ones that are clearly played by a synthesizer, and then there's other ones that, for example, like this guitar bass, that might sound a bit more like a real instrument, even if it's actually a synthesizer. So this is what it sounds like. And again, make sure you're at the right octave. You can go down by pressing Z. So I'll press the button again. You see how it's lower, and then I press Z. It's lower again. Alright, so I'm going to record a little loop. Don't know if that was right. I apologise if you can hear a lot of waffling outside. So basically, today a random cat just entered into our apartment block and just started walking up and down the stairs, meowing, and it was basically stuck in here. And luckily it was wearing a collar with a finger on its neck saying its name and a phone number. And then now my neighbour has just been trying to call this woman to give her cat back. So that's a bit of a behind the scenes of what's going on over here. Shout out Future World Machines. So, you know, basically, for the people who've just joined us, this is a beginner tutorial just showing you how you can use Ableton Live and put together a basic beat. So this is a guitar bass sound, and I've just recorded it in. And now I'm just sort of editing the MIDI notes to put them where I want them. And maybe I want this last hit to be a little bit earlier. Alright, so that's MIDI clips, basically. These three are all MIDI tracks, and they all contain MIDI clips. But what about these two audio tracks here? Well, they basically, you can just put in audio samples that could be loops, you know? So, for example, if we go into the production folder here, and then just go looking for example, a hat loop. And just go through these. And you can get these and just literally drag them in here. And it might be the wrong volume, but you can just play that along with everything else. All right, does anyone have any questions so far? I'll keep showing you some more of the effects in the meantime. So let's go and find something to sort of dirty this up with. So we've got the saturator. I could put that on the bass. I'm going to turn down the output, turn up the drive. And this is basically like, do you remember back in the day when you used to record tapes and you can either record them quiet or loud, or sometimes if you recorded it a bit too loud, it would have some distortion to it, but it wouldn't be unlistenable. It would like be, it's sometimes a little bit pleasant. So this is a tool that you can use to do some pleasant overdriving on different instruments. And for the younger crowd who've never recorded a cassette, I wouldn't say you're really missing out on that much. So, we could add another instrument. So how about a violin? I'm going to go to instruments and just type in violin. And let's just go with violin section. And this is mad because it's like, you can, using the instruments within Ableton Live, you can actually put together a full orchestral production, you know? But in this case, I just want to record a little bit of violin to add into this tune. Messed it up straight away. Alright, let's go again. And it's good to have a little practice before you press record. So just play the beat, play along with it, and then when you're actually ready and you know what you're going to do, that's when you press record. So let's go. So I can play it well now, so let me press record. Shout out to SoundGrit Audio. Thank you for saying that. You know, when it came to, like, I always say that I started off as a dubstep producer in 2008, but it's actually a lie, because earlier on in like 2003, 2004, I was massively into boom bap and UK hip hop, and basically was attempting to make stuff like that, but I just had no idea what I was doing back then. So let me do this again. This is like, you know, my apartment is in the sort of just through, you can see there's a window behind me and there's like a black curtain. Just through there is the entrance of the building, and people often enter and they're just waffling, and obviously they have no idea that they're disturbing a live stream, but this is the most it's ever happened. But like I was saying, it's due to the lost cat, so we'll let him off. But I honestly cannot wait to move house and not have to deal with that anymore. I don't want it to go like that though, that's the thing. I want some subtle notes. So anyway, the violin, obviously, you know, it kind of needs to be processed a bit to make it sound more lo-fi. In my opinion, it's just sounding way too like clean and like it's just been recorded. And we can do various things to dirty it up. And one thing I could use is that saturator again. So what we'd do is turn down the output, turn up the drive, and it sounds like this. In fact, you can take it all the way. Alright, so there's various things you can throw on here. Let me show you the delay. So for the guys who are who've never used delay before, if you're a beginner, this is basically, it's like an echo. So you know when you're standing at the top of the Grand Canyon or whatever, and you shout out and then you hear the echo, echo, echo. What that actually is a delay. So it just basically means that it's going to play the original sound, but then it's going to play a delayed version, and it's going to keep playing delayed version, so it sounds like this. And you can change the timing of it to an eighth, for example, so it goes like this. Yeah, so you can make it go on for ages, but this feedback, if you put this down to nothing, that basically means it's just going to repeat it once. So that's kind of like the Grand Canyon one, where you go, hello, hello, and it just echoes back once, you know? Anyway, I'm going to sack off the delay. I just wanted to show you that. But also, before I was going on about reverb, and there is another one called the hybrid reverb. So if you put that in, this one has a lot more options. So you've got different styles, like a hall reverb. You've got a plate reverb. You've got spring reverb. I'm going to put it on hall, and then I'm going to choose this one called long synth hall. And then this dry wet. So this dry wet control is on a lot of the different effects, and what it is basically what these terms mean is wet means it's got the effect on it. Dry means it doesn't have the effect on it. And then you can choose between the dry and wet signal. So if you put it to 100, you're only going to hear the affected sound, and it sounds like this. And then if you put it to 50%, then you're hearing basically half unaffected signal and half affected signal blended together, and it sounds like this. Anyway, that's the session view, and that's how you can quickly put together ideas in the session view. It's basically a loop player, loop recorder. You put together your loops. The great thing is some of those loops can be 2 bars, some of them can be 4 bars, some of them can be 8 bars, or even 16, you know. It's always in multiples of 4, but they can be different lengths. And this is a great way to create ideas and get started on a tune. But at some point, you're probably going to want to put this into an actual linear arrangement, right? So what you can do then is you can actually just press record and record it into the session view. So let's say, well, first of all, I'm just going to show you scenes. So here over here, you might have noticed on main, you've got all of these play buttons and they have numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Now these are scenes and every clip that's in one row is in that scene. So one thing you can do is you can right click, duplicate the scene. So now you've got the clips below it as well, and basically you've got twice of everything. And you might decide that in the first scene you don't want any bass and you also don't want any violin. All you've really got is drums and E-piano. So when you play the scene, it sounds like this. Right, and then when you play scene 2, so let's say the intro's been happening. Now you play scene 2. And you bring in the bass, right? So let's press record on that. So I'm just recording a bit of an intro. And we're going to let that loop round one more time. And then whenever you're ready, you launch the next scene. So anyway, I was recording there, but you can't see anything what I was doing. But over here in the top right, you've got these buttons that are some lines. You've got vertical lines, you've got horizontal lines. If you click the horizontal lines, it takes you over into the arrangement view. Now you're going to notice that everything's grayed out right now. And this is basically Ableton saying you're still in session view mode. You're still like playing your loops and stuff. When you're done with playing your loops and you're ready to go into arrangement mode, you just click this little button at the top here, which is like a play on some lines. In my case, it's orange. I'm going to click that. Now you're in arrangement view. So it's going to ignore those loops on the other page. And we're just dealing with arrangement view now. And this is what it looks like. So again, these are clips. And you do get a little preview if you drop them down so you can see what they look like. But if you really want to see what's going on, you go into your clip view, which is this one at the bottom. So that's what it looks like for an audio clip. That's what it looks like for a MIDI clip. And remember, MIDI is basically these notes that you put in. You can either put them in for drums, or you can put them in like this for like chords and notes and melodies. Shout out Jimmy. And by the way, guys, I was supposed to tell you at the beginning of the stream, but I completely forgot that I've been working on a beginner's course for Ableton Live called Core Foundations. So it's Ableton Live Core Foundations. I've been working on it since October and it's finally ready, and you can pre-order it. So if you look in the description of this video, there is a link to my website where you're able to pre-order the course, and it drops on the 23rd of February, and I cannot wait for you guys to check it out. And for everyone to start learning from the course. It's basically like what you've seen today. So I'm just going through absolutely every control and what everything does, but obviously it's broken down into loads of modules and loads of lessons, so it's way more in depth. But if you're interested in learning, check out Ableton Live Core Foundations at the link in the description. Yeah, so I want to just address what SoundGrit Audio said. So actually, full disclosure, I almost never use the session view unless I am actually doing my live set with a grid controller and everything. When it comes to making tunes, I literally just do it in here. And I get this loop marker. So this thing here, it's called the loop brace or loop marker. And what you can do is just put that around a certain amount of bars, for example, 4 bars, 8 bars, 16 bars, whatever. Then you can just keep that looping around and create your clips. So you can create new MIDI clips by just, there is a shortcut for it. So new MIDI track, Shift, Command and T. And to create a new audio track, it's just Command and T. Now if you're using Windows, that is Shift, Control and T for a MIDI track, just Control and T for an audio track. And then if you wanted to just create a MIDI clip out of this area here, what you do is Shift, Command and M, or Shift, Control and M if you're on Windows. That creates the MIDI clip there, and then you can just start putting your notes in. So those are, I would recommend, you know, if I was going to give you a pro tip, learn the keyboard shortcuts, because it saves you so much time and you can just work so much quicker. And I suppose the more you use Ableton Live, the quicker you can work. But once you really learn those keyboard shortcuts, then that's the way to really speed it up. So what I did before was I recorded those instruments into the arrangement view. And then you can create your arrangement. So for example, if you didn't want the bass to drop until after bar 8, you could put it there, right? And by the way, you can drag these out sideways and make them loop. So you see this, for example, this boom bap drums. If I drag this sideways, you can just drag it infinitely. But if you can see those really small dividers, it's kind of difficult to see, but there's these little dividers every, every 4 bars. There's another little divider, and that's basically this same section looping over and over again. And the great thing is that if you decide you wanted to delete this one kick here, for example, that would delete it not just from the first 4 bars, but because you've done that technique where you loop it over and over again, you can basically, it will just get rid of that kick from every loop, you know. Hope I'm explaining that well. But anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to have 8 bars of intro and then 8 bars of drop. So the bass isn't going to come in till here. The violin section isn't even going to come in till later on. So it goes like this. In fact, even that hi-hat could stay away until the drop. So it goes like this. We've got the normal drums and the E piano to start with. In fact, you know what we could do? We could even get rid of the kicks and snares from this intro part. So I've just divided that. So if you click on the line and press Command and E, you can divide it into 2 clips, and that's it's called splitting the clips. So now this is a different clip here, and what I can do is just click where it's got this kick 1 and press delete. Click where it says snare 1. That highlights all of the notes that you've put in for that snare. Press delete. Now we've just got the hat. And then what you can do here is color code this so it's a different color from the rest of the hats, just so you can see. Sorry, from the rest of the drum group as a whole. So just put it a totally different color just so we don't confuse ourselves. And this is the intro hat. Actually, I could drag the green one back like this. Alright, and then whenever you're ready, then you've got the guitar, bass and the hats coming in together. And then a little bit later the violin comes in. Does anyone have any questions for me? So I'm just going to explain one more thing. in the mixer view, in the session view, you might have noticed over here you've got these two tracks that are separate, and they're called reverb and delay. Now these are called return tracks, and then you've got these knobs here called send A and send B for each track. And what you can do is turn up the send and it'll send it to these. So we've got a reverb on A. So let's say if I wanted to add reverb to the piano, the E piano basic and the violin, and even this hi-hats here. And then what you can do is you can solo the return track to hear what's actually been sent to it. So I always feel like when it comes to teaching beginners, it's probably best to start with hip hop, and then once you've learned how to make a basic hip hop beat, move on to drum and bass. Just because it's so fast and so intricate that you might want to just learn the basics at a slower pace. That's my reasoning anyway. So when I give these very basic beginner lessons, I prefer to do a hip hop beat. And I'm just answering No-Fi Jams where he says, where's the drum and bass? So our regular drum and bass programming will commence next week. But anyway, that's return tracks. So you can send them to the reverb by turning up send A. You can send stuff to the delay by turning up send B. And then you can even create more return tracks by going up here to the create menu and just choose insert return track. Then what you can do is you can put any effect you want on that. For example, you could choose the chorus, put chorus on C return, and now you might notice that another send knob has appeared down here. So you've got A, B and C now. And anytime you want to send something to the chorus, just turn up C. And it's as easy as that. Now there's a couple of advantages of putting your effects on these return tracks. Number one, if you're running an old school computer that's got a pretty weak CPU, then basically you've just got one chorus unit and then you're sending everything to it. So it doesn't need to process that chorus 3 or 4 times, you know. So that's one reason. The other reason is because if you put an effect like a reverb onto a return track and then send stuff to it, they'll all be within that same reverb. So remember before I was going on about your empty living room? Well, then you can just imagine your violin and your E piano and your other instruments. They're all in the same living room together and they've all got the same reverberation going on together, which is going to really sort of make it so that when you finish your track, it's sounding like a finished track and everything's together as one. You know what I mean? So anyway, that's about it. So as I was saying before, the course is finished. It launches on the 23rd, and you can basically get a half price discount if you sign up now as a pre-order. And then obviously as soon as we get to the 23rd of February, it's going to open up. It's going to go back up to full price. So if you want to get it at the discounted rate, I recommend pre-ordering. But anyway, Ben's saying cohesion. Yeah, totally. So that's the word I was looking for. Put everything into a space together and it will create cohesion of the track. So anyway, I'm going to go, but thank you all so much. If you joined us halfway through and you didn't catch the beginning, you can just watch the stream back from the beginning. And also, I am going to be making a shorter version of this where I chop out a load of the waffling and make it so clear and concise, and it'll just be about 20 to 30 minutes. So that'll be out on my channel sometime within the next week. So have an amazing week, and I'll see you same time, same place next Sunday.